Welcome to the Old Mac Gang Podcast, or OMG, a podcast or videocast, depending on what you're watching or listening to us on, with a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services to age-seasoned users. I'm Marty, an Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I am a 67-year-old age-seasoned user who's collected a great group of friends to talk about Apple and Apple seasoned citizens and what kind of things are important to us. Let's see who we have on our panel today.
Good evening. I'm Bob Wood. I'm here in Tucson. I am a longtime Apple user. I've been a member and officer of Mac user groups for about 30 years now. Over to Chris.
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm 77 for another week. Retired, living here in Tucson with Bob. We're both in the Tucson Mac user group. I've been around the Mac since '84 and did a lot of stuff with the Apple user groups in Dallas and Austin, and worked for Apple for a bunch of years, and then worked for a university doing IT stuff in the Bay Area. And now I'm here in Tucson. Use a Mac Mini and iPhone 16 Pro Max, entry-level 9th generation iPad, and what else? A lot of Apple services, I guess. Peter?
I'm Peter, still 72 and still in Bay Village, near to Gary and Marty. I met at the Northeast Ohio Apple Club. And I'm still using plenty of Apple products and services, including current or near current MacBook Pro, iPad Pro, iPhone, and Apple Watch. These all make my life easier and more enjoyable, and they help me pursue a variety of ever-changing interests at the moment: hiking, biking, films, music, and math.
And I'm Marty, as I introduced myself earlier, 67-year-old Apple seasoned citizen and lots of equipment. I have a tendency to put my hobby and my money into Apple products, so I keep up to date with the latest products. Probably the thing that I am in touch with most right now is the Vision Pro, the headset, and do a podcast on the Vision Pro and other AR devices, also part of the podtalk.net, and involved in all sorts of other devices too. Gary's out tonight, so we hope, I feel a little kind of like I'm skipping a beat, and we hope we'll see him next week. But he kind of begged out tonight in terms of being ready and feeling like he could be up for doing the show tonight. So hope to see him next week, and we'll be back in full swing. So news. First of all, how many of you, maybe we can just do a raise of hands, watched the WWDC announcements live as they were happening? All of us. Oh, wow. So we all kind of tuned in, and we were communicating. I remember we were communicating during the live event in terms of things that were going on. And Gary was in on that too. Did you watch it a second time? Yep. Oh, we all watched it a second time.
Sort of. I watched a 20-minute recap. They cut it down to 20 minutes.
Yeah, and so you missed all the fun, stupid videos that they have during it.
Those were not included.
Which might have been a blessing if you just want the content. I watched it the second time, but I watched it at 1.25 speed. And it was while I was administering an exam to students. So I was proctoring it and watching a faster version of the WWDC announcements. This episode, we're going to focus on the WWDC announcements. And I'd like to hear about the ones that you think will particularly have the most impact on the demos, the folks that we're engaged with, things that folks our age could get really excited about. I'm going to do a brief rundown, and I will also be able to put this in the show notes, both in the video and in the podcast. So if you want this information, you can look at the show notes. The thing with show notes is you have limited characters that you can fit into show notes. And there's sometimes there's more allowed in the video than there is allowed in the audio podcast. So I went ahead and took these show notes out earlier and did a character count on it, and I'm under the character for both the video and the audio, so you'll get the full show notes if you want to find out about this. So with iOS 26, the big thing, of course, liquid glass and the liquid glass design. Apple Intelligence, I like the fact that they started out right at the beginning. Everybody said they were going to run away from it, and they didn't run away from it. They went right to Apple Intelligence. And the thing about it is the way they talked about it, it was integrated into everything they did. And if you look at some of the things that they can do with this new operating system, some of the little stuff that you're like, oh, wow, that's good. All of it is context-based within the data that Apple has, or that you have on your phone or have on your device. So we'll talk about hold assist. That is knowing that this phone call is not coming from somebody you know, and then that kicks in the AI that then does the function of hold assist. So when you look at what's been produced, think of it in terms of how is Apple AI running in the background and how is it using the context of what you have on your device without having to go out and get that information. So we'll talk, I know we're going to talk more about call screening and hold assist. That's important to a lot of folks. Improved Spotlight. Spotlight has always been terrible for whatever I ask it to find. And so I'm encouraged to see that they're supercharging Spotlight with some other functions to it that it can do to better build the context of what you're looking for. With gaming, there is now a gaming app. So all of your games are kind of housed under that one app. Instead of trying to find them as separate apps on your phone, you can now get them collected under one place. So that's pretty cool. And it allows some interactive stuff like, oh, there's a friend of mine who plays this game. Let me connect with them and we can play the game together, etc. Nintendo Switch just came out. And the big thing with that is that you can do interactive conversation while you're playing your Switch games together. And so Apple seems to be doing a little something like that, paying in the interaction. I don't know. WatchOS has got some things to it, like Workout Buddy, wrist flick gesture, which I think is probably of the great value. Live translation, I know that's something Peter's been interested in. tvOS has got iPhone karaoke. You can use that as a mic. iPadOS has got true multitasking. That is probably one of the bigger surprises of what came out and what people are talking about in terms of iPad now being more functional in a way that the Mac platform is functional. Files app upgrade, and then across all these devices, iPadOS and also iOS, you've got Preview now, which is the app I always use on my desktop and then couldn't find it in other platforms, and now it's available on other platforms. visionOS has a whole bunch of changes that were phenomenal in terms of kind of supporting that the platform is going to continue and people are going to be interested in the platform. So, spatial widgets, you can now put apps up on the wall, and they stay on the wall when you shut the thing off and turn it back on. The apps are up there. In the past, if you wanted to create a workspace with the apps spread around the room, every time you shut it off, you had to reestablish what apps you wanted open and things like that. Now there's continuity when that device is shut off. So it means I can do this in my office. I can do something else in downstairs in my living room and use the device to different contexts, and they remain. I don't have to set them up every time I turn it on and off. So some cool stuff there. We have some support links that will be part of this. And so just to let you know, you can find these links. This is everything that was announced at WWDC in 9 minutes. Actually, Gary supplied this. It's a nice video that covers through this through Apple Mac Rumors, excuse me. And then I like this very much. This is Apple's take on the new OS overview, and you can get it at apple.com/OS. And you see at the top, there's a tab that gives you the changes in each one of the platforms. So if you want to work with a particular device or a platform, Apple has some really great information on these pages. iOS 26 include these new 100 features and changes on your phone. I think Chris might have sent this one in. And so there are all sorts of things that iOS can do. The new 26 version, and many of them are listed there. And then another one from The Verge, WWDC 2025, all the news from Apple's annual developer conference, and you can get to watch the keynote in 28 minutes with highlights in it too if you want to watch that. And again, a similar page by The Verge. They talk about the 13 elements that are significant elements that came out of WWDC. And then iOS 26 with the little changes that were available, again, similar to that first site. So, guys, I went on too long, but I'm curious about reactions, things that you might have been reminded by that were just general reactions to the keynote. Let's go that way because we've got some questions. Anybody? General reactions, or do you want to go right to the questions?
I was impressed. I was more impressed than I expected to be. I guess I was probably a little cynical going in that Apple would have a tough time, and I think they surprised and delighted me.
Yeah, me too.
It was a good keynote, I thought. I had trouble keeping up with you guys on the text thread because I was busy watching the keynote, and there was a lot going on. And whereas one of my hardware friends is still waiting for the next iPad or the next big thing from Apple, this is clearly a software show for the developers, and it's pretty impressive what they're doing with the OSs.
Yeah, I like I said, this is the first one I really had to pay attention to, and not going from kind of a consumer to a prosumer who's producing podcasts on it. So it was tough to keep up, and I spent a good deal of time between the first run of the keynote to my second watch through trying to compile information in a way that would be useful for me to be able to put together shows on it. Bob, anything stand out for you on this?
Well, the thing that interested me was the fact that they unified everything and all the OSs end in 26.
Yeah.
I think that we need a collective noun for all the OSs, like a herd of cattle, a flock of geese, a school of fish. I would like to propose a Cupertino of OSs.
All right. I would say a nexus of OSs, to try and keep California cities out of it. But yeah. So my first question to the group, and I think it goes to Bob first. What was the one announcement that you were most surprised and pleased about?
The thing that surprised me the most and also pleased me was hold assist. I don't know how much time I've spent on hold listening to crummy music that goes over and over again and then gets interrupted by, your call is very important to us. It's going to be answered by the next available operator. Please hold. Hold assist is going to be great if it works. And I probably works on my iPhone. So I'm looking forward to that.
Peter?
Yeah, I was surprised and pleased when they talked about the watch OS dismiss gesture. I mean, that in and of itself almost would make me jump to the betas. I use my watch a lot. I'm often out and about. I don't have two hands to operate it. And a year or so ago, they came up with a gesture that allows me to drop down into the smart stack, which is where things that I can see detail from some of what other people might see from tapping complications. But there was no way to go back to the watch face. I mean, it would time out after some period of time, usually too long, and there was a period where you couldn't just glance back at your watch and see what time it is. Now you can jump back, and I think that's just great. And I've been playing with it, and I think actually they need one more gesture, and with 3 hand gestures, you could completely go anywhere. So I'm hoping they next year up the ante and add a 3rd gesture, but I'm happy to have 2, and I think it's just great.
Can I ask you something about that? I think, because I don't pay enough attention to my watch, but every time I get a ding on it, it's a notification. And
Right.
I have to with the old operating system, I had to physically go in and move that back. So I had to use my other finger to change. No, I didn't.
You don't. Now you just go. Now
Yeah,
you just shake the wrist and it's gone.
that's what I'm saying. With the previous version, I kind of physically had to take that thing off the face of my watch. With a
Right.
26, I can just shake it, and I like
Right.
that a lot.
Now the gesture that they had before is if you get a notification and it's suggesting an action, the old gesture or the gesture we already have, the second gesture will let you say, "Okay, do that."
Mhm.
So it often will be a go ahead kind of acknowledgement, whereas the new gesture is now a go away.
Yeah, yeah. Chris, what about you?
Well, the thing, I have to say, the thing that impressed me the most was the iPad OS and Mac OS coming together. I've given suggestions to folks our age several times about the benefits of iPad, and a good friend of mine finally got his first iPad, and he's really excited about it. And it couldn't come at a better time. What's going on, if anybody hadn't watched the keynote, is that the Mac OS is starting to look a lot more like the unified liquid glass design, and basically it's adopting it too. But to the casual user, it kind of looks like iPad OS has come to the Mac, because the appearance has changed like that. At the same time, they've taken some things like the menu bar and so on and added that to the iPad. So, going back and forth, the bottom line here is going back and forth from the iPad to the Mac is going to be much easier and much more fluid than it was before. And that can be beneficial on a number of levels. I, for one, because my original Mac Mini M1 has only got 16 gigs of RAM, so I tend to use the universal control stuff And, when I need the extra RAM, and we'll run things like mail and messages on the iPad. And so, being able to have a similar look and feel is, I think, a really big deal. And people have been asking and talking about for years, well, why doesn't the Mac laptop have a touchscreen? Why doesn't the iPad run macOS? Well, we've sort of got the best of both worlds now because they look a lot more similar.
Yeah, I was pleased with, for me, being a Vision Pro person, seeing glass and liquid glass on that platform, I was kind of pleased to see that it had granted enough ground to be able to be moved on to other platforms, and that kind of being a unifying look between the platforms right now. The thing that got me about the iPad that I loved, I hated those three little dots across the top where you had to decide what configuration you want. And now it plays more with expose. You can have different windows open. You can have one lead window open, and then you can spread them out and see what other windows are open. And then you can tap on the window you want. That comes to the forefront. You can also move windows into whatever framing, that particular framing that you want on the iPad. So it's like, and then you have a menu bar on some apps across the top to remind you or to use if you want to for certain apps in terms of functionality on how to use it. I think Peter, at least through the chat that we had, was most excited about what was going on with the iPad differences. And a thumbs up from Peter. So mine, which I was surprised about, I kind of asked for it. I didn't think I was very good at making any predictions of where Vision OS was going to go. And they didn't talk about it during the keynote, but it showed up in that bento box picture. And when I was trying to put together the show that night for Vision Profiles, I got the bento box picture out and it said folders. And I was like, that's exactly what I want. They kind of mentioned it during the WWDC that it was going to be a new interface. Well, what I wanted was folders, because there are about 6 or 7 categories of apps that I have: games, meditation, productivity, puzzles, and you can page through 10 pages of apps. They're not in alphabetical order anymore, so you can't find the one that you want if you can remember the name. You kind of have to remember it by icon, and for me it's sort of like, what is this? Let me click on it and find out. Oh yeah, this is a meditation app. Okay, fine, close it up. I thought it was a productivity app. But now I can start to move those all into folders. It's as tedious as it is doing it on an iPhone, but at least it's a functional system where I have categories of apps within those folders. And they're not, I wouldn't say they are folders like separate they're sort of like the folders that you see on iOS on the iPhone. So you see a square, or you saw a square with little tiny icons inside of it, and then you can edit whatever title you want for it. So I was excited about that, did not expect it. Question 2, what was one announcement or lack of announcement that you were disappointed in? Bob?
Well, I was hoping to see Apple open their APIs to other artificial intelligence entities that one could use more directly than going to a website or a different application. But maybe that's coming.
Yeah, they've hinted at that, and you're right. Maybe it is coming in the future. So the idea that the OS can open up And you can have choices like I want Gemini, or I want Perplexity, or I want ChatGPT, or I want all three of them if I'm willing to pay for them, as a move out from whatever the S lady's doing or Apple Intelligence is doing. Peter?
Yeah, for me, no announcement of AirPod specific live translation was a major bummer. Uh, I liked all the live translation stuff they did announce. I'm a big advocate of it. I've engaged in some online conferences where you get subtitles in English for whatever language people speak in any of the Hollywood squares. So I know how powerful it can be. But I think my use of live translation would be out in the marketplace, out, at a concert, at different places where you meet people who talk different languages, and I'd like to use it in real life. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it will arrive when AirPods Pro 3 are released.
So if we see an AirPods Pro 3 and we see iOS 26.2 or 26.3, maybe the point 3 version will have that live translation that connects with the new product that they want to sell more of. I would love to have that. The idea of going to a foreign country and having your phone and you're going back and forth with your phone, but to have more real time live translation would be very cool. Chris?
So no announcement about Photometer and Pixelmator Pro. So a little disappointed about that. Maybe we won't see it until the new iPhones come out. They did come out with the simplified Apple camera, and I would give it 5 stars. They are absolutely doing everything that we wanted them to do in terms of making that incredible Swiss Army knife of an app that the old Apple camera was a lot simpler. Now you've got photos and you've got video, and and you can get to the controls. It's very nicely done. I'm looking forward to using that. And they also updated the Apple Photos app in a very nice way, that there is now a similar bifurcation between the library, in which case you just see the library, or collections. Collections include all of the other stuff. And so it makes it a lot easier to use, and looking forward to using that as well. So, kind of got half, but not the other half. I'm still looking forward, because Photometer is a really nice app, and it's already got some stuff that Apple Photos doesn't or didn't. I mean, we'll have to take a look and see.
Did you see any integration like, oh, now it's doing this and Photometer does this? Anything from what you had looked at so far?
Well, to be honest, I haven't had time to really play with it, and I've only got 26 running on the iPad OS,
Yeah.
which is a non-M iPad. It's the entry level, so it doesn't have the Apple Intelligence stuff on it, but it may encourage me to update my iPad later this year. We'll see.
I have it running on my 16E, and I know, and I'm not a photographer, but I went into photos anyways to see it. And there were certain things like you could turn certain things on, but it didn't seem like I could turn them back off again. They would, kind of go to the top in the corner, and then I would try to remove that function like contrast or something like that, and I couldn't. I couldn't shut it off. So I was also curious. I have a 16 Pro Max, and if any of that functionality is now different in the camera button on the side, because the 16E doesn't have a camera button, but now has that improved camera button functions, and I haven't tried that out yet. Be interesting to see, and maybe hear from some photography folks if they have a chance to try it out. I was disappointed that there was no hint of new hardware. They keep saying this is a software developers conference, and I accept that. But even though they say it's a software developers conference, in the past years, they've released some hardware. In half the time, yes, half the time, no, they haven't. But I was really banking on Home Hub, or HomePod or whatever you want to call it that acts as a home hub. Uh, at least some initial description of what the device is like and some acknowledgement that Apple was going to release APIs for programmers to be able to use to develop apps or integration with Home Hub. But that didn't happen. So I was a little disappointed with that process. Question number 3, general reactions to other mentions during the keynote. Bob?
Well, I think that the unification of the OS is important. But the updated design seems to me like it's a lot of painting the trim and changing the drapes. Of course, that being said, if you're going to do that, now is the time to do it. When you have the ability to change things wholesale so they all are more cohesive across all the platforms.
Peter?
Yeah, a couple things that I had general reactions, both positive to. One is Apple saved places and saved routes. If I understand that correctly, that'll make my navigation in my car go a lot better. There are places I go in different cities, nearby, and I don't necessarily like the routes that are auto-generated, and I like going there the way that I think lets me do some errands along the way, and I look forward to those. Uh, and the other thing is shortcut improvements. I mean, I'm going to need to dig into those, but I make some use of shortcuts now to do things that the operating system leaves out. And it looks like, with what they said, that a lot of things that people say, oh, it should do this or it should do that, you can make it do that. And I think increasingly in an easy way. So, more to report on that after I've explored it.
Yeah, shortcuts is something that I haven't gotten into in past versions. And people, friends talk about them like, oh, it's great because I can set my house for lights to turn on or turn off. When I'm approaching in a geofenced area, Apple, with my phone, it'll trigger this or it'll trigger that. And I know Peter, you're a math teacher, and can appreciate this long division versus like short division or quicker ways of doing division. I've always been a long division guy. So it might be open this app, then close this app, then open this app. That's the long division version of it versus a shortcut hitting the thing and making it work. And I haven't been able to do, I think it really is, you don't have to be a programmer to use shortcuts, but I think people who have a programming background get it. It's kind of an if this, then that sort of thing. And I haven't been able to successfully initiate the kinds of things I want it to initiate. If it gets AI and smarter, then I might take another crack at it because AI might know what I want and fix it versus me trying to put together the pattern that I need for the particular action that I want. I do go in and look at Spotlight, catalogs or the versions of different shortcuts, excuse me, not Spotlight, the different things that shortcuts can do and pull them down. It's like, yeah, I need to try that. And then I just don't integrate it into my workflow enough. But it's cool that they're doing more and more with it, with improvements. And I really hope that they integrate AI in it more. Chris.
I think Peter had a question.
Oh, yeah, Peter.
I was just going to make a quick comment, which is that I think getting into shortcuts, they don't need to be complicated. I mean, there's times where I say, I wish Siri would do this when I ask it to. Well, I make a shortcut that does that. I give it the name that I'm going to use. And then when I say it to Siri, Siri does it. So one example might be open the Chat GPT app and go into the interactive dialogue part of that. And that becomes a verb for Siri. We will just reliably do it.
Yeah, again, I'm going to forget that I put that shortcut together, and I'm just going to open up ChatGPT and do the long division version of it. I have they say the human brain can only hold between up to 7 things at a time in their head. I think that's really, and 5 is the average or something like that. And I think I'm below average on what I can hold in my head. So to remember all of the shortcuts, even to remember keystroke combinations for me is a difficult kind of memory challenge for it. So yeah, if again, if for me, I would do that if I had a complicated workflow and AI could produce a shortcut for me instead of me having to do the programming with it. But I know you enjoy that kind of stuff. I know that kind of logical stuff is right up your path in terms of Rubik's cubes and other things that you've talked about in our mug with the things that you enjoy doing. So I get it for you. I get it for you. It's just difficult for me. Chris.
Yeah, so I'm with you, Marty. I've always been kind of a manual kind of guy. When I create shortcuts and things like Lightroom, they tend to break over time. Then I've got to scratch my head and try to remember what the manual process was. If I just stick with the manual process, it works every week, every month. So in terms of my overall general observation, excuse me, I think there's no question now that Vision OS is definitely driving the wagon in terms of the OS look and feel. And that sort of gives me a hint that there's, more out there in the Apple Vision Pro land. I think that message came through pretty clearly. And the new OS looks pretty good. So,
yeah, I'm excited about it. They did quite a bit on the enterprise end of it, so you can have teams of people now looking at the app or looking at the animation or whatever's created in terms of training, and they can have separate headsets in and tuned into the same stuff. And from the entertainment standpoint, you can also sit down with somebody who has a Vision Pro headset and play the same app or watch the same movie. All of that's kind of integrated. So yeah, I was impressed with the fact that all these folks who over the year have been chanting about how just let Vision Pro die. They just don't understand it or get it. But I think that and glasses are going to be the next big product push for Apple. Chris?
yeah, I was going to say the mention of enterprise during the Apple Vision Pro section was interesting because I have heard of a couple of enterprises that are really excited about the Apple Vision Pro. I don't know what they're doing. It's all secret, of course, but in one particular situation, they'd been playing around with $10,000 headsets and they were really excited. Not only was it a $3,500 headset, but there was a real operating system behind it that they could count on in the future. And, corporations and enterprises think about stuff like that in terms of long-term planning. So
Yeah, the thing too is, you can see if you have a Vision Pro headset, you can go into their app store and you can see these kind of demo apps where you open them up and it shows you how you can blow up a engine and pull the parts out of it and stuff like that. And that's all a sales pitch for enterprise, for training, for development, things like that. So yeah, this was not too hard to see coming. It's just great that they've really emphasized it. The other piece that goes with that is that on those devices, you can lock down certain information in terms of privacy. So if I'm using a headset to do surgery, but I'm also accessing a client's file, a patient's file for information, that can be locked down and no one else who puts the headset on can have access to it. So the idea that they're really trying to build those privacy and security issues into the headset for more enterprise and for, more than entertainment use, business use of it is pretty cool. My really kind of mentions that other thing I want to mention, I've already mentioned Spotlight search with context. The idea that Spotlight is going to be improved through using keywords or keywords that are tied to certain contexts that are part of your experience, not part of the general world's experience. So you can really search for documents that with a particular frame of reference or a time frame or a particular topic to make it much more effective in terms of Spotlight bringing up what you want. Emojis, yeah, they spent a lot of time. They spent too much time on emojis. I don't know if it was a lot of time, but it felt like too much time. Big news with emojis is you can take two emojis and make them into one. Um, I have a hard enough time making one emoji or, Genmoji and not really find much use for it, but that's generational, I think, for me at least. I just don't get that. But that seemed to I suggested that they take all the emoji team off emojis and put them right on the S lady and put them to work because that's where I think they'll get more bang for their buck. Um, and then some of the things uh, that I think Spotlight can do is some of the things that Alfred does or Hazel does. A couple of apps that have been popular apps on the Mac platform. I think they're gunning for that kind of functionality with Spotlight, and it's about time. It really is about time that they've done something with Spotlight. Last question. Any thoughts about what new aspect may be the greatest help to our demographic? Bob.
Again, I have to go back to hold assist and call screening. It would seem that our seasoned citizen demographic spends more and more time on the phone calling doctors, pharmacies, insurance companies that never seem to answer before going to hold. And the music seems to have three varieties: bad, terrible, and painful. So this is going to be a big assist for me and other seasoned Apple citizens.
Peter?
Yeah, I would go with something that really would have surprised me before the actual keynote. Is I'm going to say Apple Intelligence, particularly the intelligent mail analysis. I mean, we've been able to pull contacts out of a email message, easily create a contact. That's very convenient. Now we can create calendar items just as easily. And this can be applied to visual intelligence, screenshots from other apps that don't end up being preserved. You get the intelligence off them, or just things you do with your camera, walking past the movie theater that's showing a band coming sometime next month. You take a picture of it, it throws it in your calendar. Somebody hands you a business card, you take a picture of it, and you get all the detail and throw it in a contact. I wish there was a way to do it for either a calendar item or make it a reminder, if it's not a specific time on a day. But I'm sure that'll come.
Yeah, I go back to being impressed with what they're doing with Apple Intelligence. First of all, they didn't shy away from talking about it. They integrated into the kinds of things as they're going through the different things that the platform can now do. The magical stuff that the platform can now do is context-based Apple Intelligence. It's taking information like your calendar and what's open. It's taking information like the email and some appointment that you have. And it's being able to combine both of those or ask you if you want to put this on your calendar. It's really more on device, and people want it to do big chat GPT LLM stuffs, and Apple's not there yet. But where it is where other platforms aren't, which is combining the context in terms of what Apple Intelligence can do for the user, for whoever wants to use it within the context of the information that they have. So yeah, I was excited about it, and I think that could be, if there could be some good training on that for people in our demographic, once it gets settled, in the next 6 months or so, I think it'll be pretty cool what it can do. I went to an Apple Intelligence training at Apple prior to this release. I went to an Apple store and went to one of the classes, and it was, yeah, take a picture of this, it can read it for you, and then you can do this and you can do that. But it really didn't have the promise of the full functionality of the stuff that we saw happen at WWDC this year. Chris.
Yeah, I was going to pretty much go with what Bob said on the call screening and the hold assist. But I would also say, and this is going back to what you and Peter were just talking about, all of the little stuff, like there's something where you can correct spellings and dictation now. I'm not quite sure how that works. I'm looking forward to getting into that and finding out, because that would be a biggie. My wife's name, Sue, in dictation was repeatedly spelled HSU for years because a friend of mine's wife was in her name, and for some reason dictation picked up on it and would always spell it that way. And so being able to correct and little stuff like that, and I think you're right, Marty, that this is gonna be like ample territory for folks like iPhone Life that do this kind of training for seniors. We've mentioned them before. It's a subscription service, but a lot of it's for free. So there's just lots and lots of little stuff for people who want to look into it and say, well, how could I make what I'm doing more efficient? Kind of like what Peter was saying. And I'm sure this may be things we talk about in the future, but there are just tons of little stuff, and that I think in our show notes, we have something on a link on that. And just running through those titles, you go, wow, I could use that. So, but again, it's if it works as advertised, and like you were saying, Marty, during the keynote, not everything's going to arrive on day one. So some of the things that we're talking about may be in subsequent releases or subsequent betas anyway.
Yeah, I would encourage folks in our demo who are listening to this or looking at some of the sites, pick one thing. Don't pick all 100 things. Pick one thing that seems like it's appealing to you, and you can kind of just Google how do you do this in OS 26, and you'll get some instruction somewhere on how to do that one little thing. Just in terms of improving the quality of life that you have with your phone. I always put myself last, and I always wind up repeating what other people have said. Hold assist was, I think, the greatest help to our demographic. And it's not just the calls that doctors give you that, Bob talked about and being put on hold. You can now shut off that music, which is really nice. You can even supposedly have them call you back, or the phone call you back when they finally pick back up, which is nice. But for me, it's about spammers, because I get phone calls from numbers that I don't know. And is it a student that's calling me? Is it a business that's calling me? Is it my doctor's office that's calling me? I don't know who it is. And the idea that it can go and they have to tell me who they are before I pick up, if I choose to pick up, is just a blessing for me, because I get I get anxious, and it's like, well, I guess I need to pick this up, even though I don't know who this person is. It could be the call that I've been waiting for from the doctor to tell me when an appointment is, etc. And I pick it up, and it's somebody who got my name off a website and wants to offer me to fix my website for me for a fee. I didn't ask them to call me. I don't care what they think about my website, but I wish I could have gotten that, so I'd say bye. Yeah, Chris.
Well, I was just going to add to that what we had before, once visual voicemail came out, was an unknown call pops up, and you tap voicemail, and then it proceeds to go into visual voicemail, and if the person chooses to say who they are, why they're calling, and then you could pick up. The big difference now is, unless somebody's in your contacts, you can set all of your unknown calls to do that automatically, so that you hear the phone ringing, and it announces in my hearing aids if it's a contact, and if it's not, I can just wait and see if the visual voicemail goes off, and that is hugely more convenient in terms of the interruption, whatever I'm doing and where my phone is. It is in my back pocket
Hmm.
or in a holster or whatever. But I think that'll really be helpful. And, I've even said to doctor's offices, look, I don't pick up unknown calls. So if you guys call me and it's not a number that says Tucson, whatever, I'm not going to pick it up. And they, by and large, they're all saying now, oh, we understand all our clients are like that. Our patients are like that. We're very sorry. She accidentally used her personal cell. Well, I get it. That's going to happen. And that's not a problem. But this call screening really has the potential to really be very convenient.
Yeah. Well, last show we did our predictions, and Bob was keeping a running score sheet. He wasn't here for the last show, so he could be the independent umpire to make the calls on it. Bob, do you have any predictions of how our predictions came through from the last
Well, I
episode?
certainly, well, I certainly do, Marty. Please now imagine that I'm putting on my loud plaid sport coat and a bow tie and going into game show announcer mode. We all had three predictions and one super prediction. Each regular prediction was worth 10 points, and the super prediction could be a doubler. It turns out that I also made predictions and sealed them in a mayonnaise jar and sent them off to Chris Wesselman's front porch so I could share that too. Turns out that Chris and I tied for third place with a total of 10 points each. So we got one thing that we predicted. And it was Peter in second place. He got one thing that he predicted, which came to be, and that is the flat, layered, skeuomorphic, simplified OSs across the platform. And he also predicted real-time language translation in AirPods. Well, we got the real-time language translations, but not in AirPods. So the board of judges gave him 5 points for that. And he also had something else that he predicted, and we gave him point 0.2 in the super prediction range. So he ended up with a total of 18 points. Of course, that leaves Marty, the winner, with 20 points out of a possible 60. He got his major overhaul, the rounded corners and UI translucent stuff, and his new version numbering. With everything goes to 26. So our winner is Marty, and he wins the grand prize behind the curtain number 2, which is the Apple Vision Pro that he already owns.
Okay, I'm so proud. Now, let me tell you something, and since we won't have to do this for another year, this is how I came up with my picks. I wrote a small routine for ChatGPT,
Oh, boy.
and I took a bunch of articles, many that we had in our show and other shows that talked about what were the predictions for WWDC. And I asked ChatGPT to do an analysis of it. And I did put it in deep research. So it spent a long time trying to figure this out. And I asked it to rank from the highest to the least possible. And that's where I drew my predictions from. So next year, learn how to use AI. Yeah, and then some of the long shot ones I chose from lower down. The the doubler one or the third out the what was it, the third pick I chose from lower down the level. And some of you had already chosen some of the ones at the top. So I played my odds that way. So thanks. Thanks for doing that, Bob. Thanks for setting it up. I'm on the Mac show on Friday, and last Friday we did our predictions, and they do the process a little bit different. It's more betting on what other people say than betting on what you say. And so, next year we'll see what happens with us and with this process if we want to do it again. I know we're running up on the hour, so I want to make a mention of MacStock. MacStock 9 is here for 3 days on July 11th, 12th, and 13th, 2025. It's in Northern Illinois in Crystal Lake, and it is close to Woodstock, Illinois. You can attend it directly if you wish by coming to the site, and you can get a ticket for it at macstockconferenceandexpo.com. You get $50 off at checkout if you use PodTalk50 as the code at checkout. You'll save $50 if you want to do that. They also have virtual tickets on sale now. Very reasonable price. The virtual stuff comes out 30 to 40 days afterwards. We take all the video. Mike Potter takes all the video and produces that and puts it together in a way that is great for people who can't attend, that they can actually come in and see the whole show and the whole experience of what was done. So take a look at macstockconferenceandexpo.com. Guys, do you have anything else to add or say? All right. So let's wrap up on this episode. Our next live episode will be Wednesday, June 18th at 9 p.m. through YouTube, where you can watch this crew at youtube.com/@oldmacgang. You can always pick up the podcast or video later if you missed the live show. Share it with your friends. Share it with your Mac user groups. Our music bed is by Philip Gross Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. More information about this podcast and others can be found at thepodtalk.net. Thanks to the group, Chris, Peter, and Bob, and we hope to see Gary back next week. And thank you for being part of the Old Mac Gang. We'll see you next time.